The AEC Routemaster is a double-decker bus designed by London Transport and built by the Associated Equipment Company and Park Royal Vehicles. The first prototype was completed in September 1954 and the last one was delivered in 1968. The layout of the vehicle was traditional for the time, with a half-cab, front-mounted engine and open rear platform, although the coach version was fitted with rear platform doors. Forward entrance vehicles with platform doors were also produced, as was a unique front entrance prototype with the engine mounted transversely at the rear. The first Routemasters entered service with London Transport in February 1956 and the last were withdrawn from regular service in December 2005, although one heritage route is still operated by Routemasters in central London. The first London bus route to be operated by the Routemaster was the 2, on February 8, 1956, with RM1. The same bus, with a revised front end, appeared at the Lord Mayor's show in November 1956. Most Routemasters were built for London Transport, although small numbers were built for British European Airways and the Northern General Transport Company. A total of 2,876 Routemasters were built, with 1,280 still in existence. A pioneering design, the Routemaster outlasted several of its replacement types in London, survived the privatisation of the former London Transport bus operators and was used by other operators around the UK. In modern UK public transport bus operation, the old-fashioned features of the standard Routemaster were both praised and criticised. The open platform, while exposed to the elements, allowed boarding and alighting in places other than official stops, and the presence of a conductor allowed minimal boarding time and optimal security, but with greater labour costs. Despite the retirement of the original version, the Routemaster has retained iconic status, and is considered a British cultural icon. In the late 2000s, work began on a new Routemaster bus inspired by the Routemaster's traditional design. It entered service in February 2012. Design. The Routemaster was developed between 1947 and 1956 by a team directed by Armand and Colin Curtis, with vehicle styling by Douglas Scott. The design brief was to produce a vehicle that was lighter, easier to operate and that could be maintained by the existing maintenance practices at the recently opened Aldenham Works, but with easier and lower-cost servicing procedures. The resulting vehicle seated 64 passengers despite being 3/4 of a ton lighter than buses in the RT family, which seated 56. The first task on delivery to service was to replace London's trolleybuses, which had themselves replaced trams, and to begin to replace the older types of diesel bus. The Routemaster was designed by London Transport and constructed at Park Royal Vehicles, with the running units provided by its sister company AEC. Both companies were owned by Associated Commercial Vehicles, which was taken over by Leyland Motors in 1962. It was an innovative design and used lightweight aluminium along with techniques developed in aircraft production during World War II. As well as a novel, weight-saving integral design, it also introduced for the first time on a bus independent front suspension, power steering, a fully automatic gearbox and power hydraulic braking. This surprised some early drivers, who found the chassis unexpectedly light and nimble compared with older designs, especially as depicted on film on tests at the Chiswick Works skid pan. Footage of RM200 undergoing the skid test at Chiswick was included in the 1971 film on the buses. The Routemaster was a departure from the traditional chassis body construction method. It was one of the first integral buses with a combination of an A steel subframe and a rear B steel subframe, connected by an aluminium body. The gearbox was mounted on the underside of the body structure with shafts to the engine and back axle. Prototypes. London Transport placed 4 prototype Routemasters in service between 1956 and 1958. The first two were built at the London Transport Works at Chiswick, the third by Wayman at Addlestone, and the fourth, an experimental Green Line coach, at Eastern Coachworks at Lowestoft. The third and fourth had Leyland engines. The Routemaster was first exhibited at the Earl's Court Commercial Motor Show in 1954. In 1961, 24 longer RMLs were built as a test, going into production from 1965. In 1962, the front entrance RMF concept was tried, with RMF 1254 based on the trial RMLs. This was exhibited and toured, leading to the production of a small number of RMF and RMA buses. In 1964, just before commencement of mainstream production of the RML, the final front-engined Routemasters, AEC started work on a front entrance, rear-engine prototype, FRN1. Completed in 1966, it saw regular London service, then on London Coaches tour operations, before being withdrawn in 1983. It was nicknamed the Fruitmaster. Production of mechanical components was undertaken chiefly at AEC's Southall site, with body construction and final assembly at Park Royal Vehicles. The majority of production examples were 27 feet 6 inches long, within maximum length regulations. The regulations were later relaxed and 29 feet 11 inches long types were produced, although these were delayed by union resistance to the extra work for conductors. Room and RML Class London Transport took delivery of 2,123 RMs and 524 RMLs. The RML was a standard room with a distinctive and seemingly out-of-place half-window section added in the middle, giving 8 extra seats. This was not a dramatic change, as it took advantage of the modular design approach of the Routemaster that would be copied by other manufacturers. The RML code was originally used to identify the Routemaster Leyland, with what became the RML originally designated the Air. The room and RML had an area beneath the rear staircase where, when not collecting fares, the conductor could stand without obstructing boarding, alighting passengers. Seating was provided for 64 passengers on RMs. RMC and RCL class. The RMC was a coach version for Green Line routes. RMCs had modified suspension and interiors to allow a longer range and more comfortable running, an electrically operated door instead of an open platform, and a semi-automatic gearbox with higher gear ratios. The RCL was a long version of the RMC with a larger engine and similar coach-style features. Seating was provided for 57 on RMCs and 65 on RCLs. RMF and RMA class. The RMF and RMA class were production versions of the front entrance Routemaster, primarily for non-London and airline use. Like the RMC, RCL, they had an electrically operated door, but at the front of the bus, along with the staircase. After being exhibited and demonstrated to other operators, the RMF attracted little interest, apart from an order from Northern General Transport Company and, in a short version, from British European Airways. Northern General. The British electric traction subsidiary Northern General Transport Company introduced the RMF in 1964-65, with an initial batch of 18, followed by another 32 and later joined by the prototype RMF 1254. This order created considerable interest and raised eyebrows within the bus industry, as Northern had been one of the biggest investors in the new rear-engined Leyland Atlanteans. However, Northern shared many routes with the United Automobile Services, which operated the Bristol Low-Decker, and the Atlantean did not match their performance and passenger satisfaction, so Northern brought in the RMFs as a better match. They were fitted with Leyland engines and a higher ratio rear axle for operation on longer trunk routes. Other notable differences were a standard, single-panel front destination blind, sliding windows and a one-piece driver's windscreen. They operated in various Northern red and cream liveries, receiving the Poppy Red corporate livery and NBC Northern Fleet names in the National Bus Company era. The RMF fleet wore the long-standing adverts characteristic of buses in the northeast of England, shop at bins. Northern Routemasters were well liked by their crews. The high axle ratio meant a good turn of speed on long-distance routes such as Newcastle to Darlington, and power steering was well appreciated on busy urban services in Gateshead and Sunderland. Their service in the north also produced the odd sight of a Routemaster with a roll sign, X1 Scandinavia, connecting with the DFDS ferry from North Shields to Scandinavia. However, throughout the 1970s it became increasingly uneconomic to have conductors on interurban services. Despite driver and customer satisfaction, Northern had little option but to replace them. Northern placed a large order for Bristol VRs with Eastern Coachworks and Willowbrook Bodywork in 1977 to replace them. Withdrawals began in May 1977 with the last withdrawn in October 1980. Most were scrapped, although 14 were sold to London Transport. Only one entered service, as an open top with London coaches. British European Airways purchased 65 RMAs built to the shorter length in 1966-67 for use on its airport bus service between the West London Air Terminal and Heathrow Airport. They were geared for 70 miles per hour running on the M4 motorway. Withdrawals started in January 1975, with British Airways discontinuing the service in March 1979. All 65 RMAs were eventually sold to London Transport. Safety. The open platform is potentially dangerous, as passengers can board, alight, and stand on the platform at any time. Even with the bus travelling at speed, the presence of a conductor to regulate access to the platform helps, but the conductor also has to collect fares throughout the bus, and, even if on the platform, cannot prevent all incidents. Former London Mayor Ken Livingstone said in 2013 that the Routemasters were too dangerous, with around 12 people per year losing their lives after falling from them during his mayoralty. Colour schemes. With the Routemasters' longevity, examples were painted to celebrate both the Queen's Silver and Golden Jubilees. In 1977, 25 Routemasters were painted silver and temporarily renumbered SRM1 to SRM25 to celebrate the Silver Jubilee, and in 2002, 50 buses were painted gold, including 3 RMs and 12 RMLs. During privatisation in London from 1986, several private operators won contracts to operate services, including Routemaster-operated routes. Before an 80% red rule for liveries was introduced in 1997 by London Transport, the contract tendering authority. Some of these new entrants ran Routemasters in non-red liveries, most notably Kentish Bus on Route 19 and Boreham Wood Travel Services on Route 13. The iconic nature of the Routemaster appealed to the many new operators outside London that appeared post-1986 in the UK following bus deregulation. Several traditional operators purchased second-hand Routemasters as a cheap way of expanding their fleets in response to competition from new operators after deregulation. And new operators also chose it as a distinctive-looking bus. Painted in a variety of colours, they were used in regular service in Bedford, Blackpool, Burnley, Carlisle, Corby, Doncaster, Dundee, Glasgow, Hull, Manchester, Perth, Rotherham, Scarborough, Southampton and Southend-on-Sea. One of the earliest examples, if not the earliest, of deregulated use of Routemasters was early in the history of the Stagecoach Group. By 2014, one of the largest operators in the UK, Stagecoach used vintage Routemasters in its new corporate livery of all over white with red, orange and blue stripes. To start one of its first operations, Magic Bus, in Glasgow in the late 1980s. In the mid-1980s, Clydeside Scottish purchased 114 Routemasters for use in Glasgow, with many repainted at Aldenham Works. Most were withdrawn in 1990. Towards the end of this period, in July 1994 in Reading, new operator Reading Mainline built up a 45-strong Routemaster fleet to compete with the established operator, Reading Buses, in the process becoming the largest operator of Routemasters outside London. They used conductors to compete on speed in the town centre and, in the outskirts, took advantage of the rear platform to operate hail and ride sections of route. In 1998, Reading Mainline was sold to Reading Buses. Some Routemasters continued in use until July 2000, with the costs of running elderly two-person buses, and with a general reduction in the number of operators, buses, and services in the years following deregulation as competitors merged or closed. Use of Routemasters outside London declined through the 1990s. Many of these buses found their way back to London to assist with the refurbishment programme, as spares donors or to increase fleet size. Withdrawal from mainstream London service saw another resurgence in the use of Routemasters outside London, but on a smaller scale than immediately after deregulation. After 2000, Routemasters were mostly used on small novelty or seasonal routes. Green livery Green Routemasters worked for London Transport's Country Bus division, which took coach-type RMCs and RCLs for Green Line and later RMLs. RCLs entered service in areas where the RMC was not introduced. These vehicles passed to the nationalised National Bus Company's subsidiary London Country Bus Services in 1969, which took over outlying areas of London Transport bus operation resulting from the 1968 Transport Act. 69 RMCs, 43 RCLs and 97 RMLs were transferred by the latter half of the 1970s. Most of these vehicles had been reacquired by London Transport as London Country modernised and standardised its fleet and as increased car use and improved commuter railways reduced suburban bus demand. Most of the RMLs found use on Red London bus routes, and the RMCs and RCLs were cascaded into the training fleet. As the RCLs were less old and London Transport was suffering from lack of parts, between 1980 and 1984 several were converted to bus use.